So there is an Oblivion remake on the horizon, dropping essentially any day now. Nobody knows what the actual day of its release will be, but we know that whenever that day comes, that's going to be the day they're shadow dropping it. And I do have a theory for the release date, which is April 2nd. And I'm picking that day because it would be funny for them to say, hey, we're making the Elder Scrolls 4 a second time. Therefore, this is the Elder Scrolls 4 2. Call me crazy, but 4-2 seems like a good date to do that on. And I've heard rumors that not rumors, I think the Nintendo Switch 2 Direct is on the 2nd, is on April 2nd, and I know that if, Bethesda has a spot in that showcase, which would make sense. It would make sense if you were saying, hey, Game Pass is now on the Switch. You can have Game Pass on Nintendo. And on Game Pass, you'll have access to titles like this Oblivion remake, which is available today. And that would be cool I think both parties would be interested in that, because for Nintendo, it's a way for them to say, hey, you'll have access to a bunch of other titles on the Switch 2, and it can show off the hardware in terms of we can run this Unreal Engine 5 game and on the hardware. It would be quite the surprise, I think, if that were to happen, but I think that isn't so far out of the realm of possibilities. I know Mr. Matty Plays talked about it.
Skyrim was part of the Nintendo Switch reveal, and
was like, yeah, call me crazy. But there's a chance. We'll see. The day I want them to release the game is actually tomorrow. And whenever you're watching this, if it's still not out, that's the day I want this game to release on. I want it as soon as possible. And for each day that it doesn't release, I will continue to caress Meridia's beacon and say to myself, maybe tomorrow. It could always be tomorrow. Please, tomorrow. The Oblivion remake has easily become my most anticipated game of the year. As much fun as I think Florida Game will be, I worry that it will be a little too on the nose with our political moment in America, and I'd prefer some non-satirized, just good old-fashioned escapism, hence the comeback of my faceless YouTube gaming channel. I digress. I want to have an accurate frame of reference for the remake as I play through it, and not just blindly parrot other people's old opinions on it while I'm playing. So I've been replaying the OG over the last week or so. I haven't played Oblivion since I was a kid. Skyrim came out, and I started playing that, and basically never stopped. It just kind of strangely didn't occur to me to go back and replay Oblivion because I had other games to play, and if I ever got an itch for Elder Scrolls, I just kind of blindly assumed Skyrim was superior since, it's newer, and I would just play that. So, pretty much after Skyrim came out, I don't think I went back and played Oblivion. I'm sure other people can relate to that. If you didn't play these games as a kid or back in the day or whatever, you may not have the nostalgia necessary to play this game and look past the poor graphics, but I think you should give it a shot anyways. You're like, oh, but it looks weird. My counterpoint is that Oblivion was always weird. It was weird when it came out, and that weirdness is part of what makes Bethesda's games so memorable, why they've sold so well, why they're such a cultural touchstone. And, there's this really handcrafted, homemade feel to the games they make, because they're made by a bunch of weirdos like you who write in weird NPCs who will randomly ask you, like, what's the fine for necrophilia?
Yes, I hate the gods, all gods. They can all bite my garters. And if you don't like it, you can bite my garters too. The gods don't do a damn thing. Do they even exist? How could anyone tell? Daedra lords, sure. They exist. They do things. Bad things mostly, but things you can see. The gods? They don't do a damn thing. So why do we build big chapels and sit around and mumble and ask them to save us from this and that? It's stupid. And chapels and priests and folks groveling on their knees, they're stupid too.
Oblivion, 19 years later, has not lost that charm. And I've been really enjoying it. I know my buddy is playing Morrowind. He's been really enjoying some of the strange NPC encounters in that. Anyway, if you didn't play the Elder Scrolls games back in the day, you won't remember what a pain in the butt the loading times were. You would kind of enter a door in a cave and you'd wait about 1.5 minutes or 2 minutes to load into the next area because your console was literally like secretly rebooting during this process. That's no longer an issue, obviously, as solid state drives exist and load times are insane. So like traversing through, you used to have to look at a loading screen for like a long time to play through an Elder Scrolls game or a Fallout game. That's gone. So going back I've been going back. I have a Series S and a Series X, one in 2 different places, and going back and playing through these titles has been like a revelation. I think these consoles are kind of really awesome for exploring your back catalog. That was one of the first things that I did when I got my Xbox Series S back in 2020 was go back and play through Skyrim. And it literally felt like, the textures were better, obviously, because it's, newer hardware. I think it had just gotten like a 60 frames per second patch, and I had never experienced Skyrim in 60 frames per second. And so everyone was like, oh, PS5's got all these exclusives. And I'm like, yeah, but the Series S is like the best version of Skyrim I've ever played. If you're on PC, laugh it up. But for me, it was like, oh my God, this game is running faster than whoever this guy is. The SSD load times completely changed the way I play, making it easier than ever to sink hours into the game in, a single sitting. The same has been true thus far as I've been playing through Oblivion again. So in light of that, I think now is a perfect time to jump into these games and give them a chance. Even with the remake on the horizon, I think there's value to be had in appreciating Oblivion because it's kind of like the Mac Daddy godfather of all these open world titles in a way. And I think you ought to give it a chance and play through it. I've been having a lot of fun with Oblivion this past week or so. I think I've sunk like 12 or 15 hours into a playthrough just over this past weekend. And I would confidently tell you that even if they do nothing at all to alter the game with this remake other than giving it an Unreal Engine reskin, I think it'll still be worth your time to play it, even if the combat stays the same. Oblivion's combat is actually based. It's good, actually. I wrote you an epic poem to summarize what this next section will be about. Here goes. You think this combat reeks of mold. You think that just because it's old. But what if then I to you told that this simplicity is bold? But I'm not a rapper. Anyways, I've actually been overjoyed with the combat in this game thus far, and my strange comparison is going to be Dark Souls, of all things, which doesn't make sense, and we'll cover that in a minute. But for right now, suffice it to say that as a kid, I didn't really know how the combat worked. I wasn't aware of like the math behind it, and I mostly played a Breton mage character who would burn his foes to cinders and summon Exivali and Dremora lords to do his bidding. And I don't even think I wore armor. I had like no real build going on because I was very small and didn't know basically anything because I was a child. So I just kind of dropped the difficulty slider and went through it casting spells. I am not doing that this time around. for this new playthrough, I've made it a point to leave the difficulty slider as it is, because I want to play this game, the way it was meant to be played, on its default setting, so I can get the real Oblivion experience. And let me just say, it's been challenging. And that is why very soon I will compare it to Dark Souls, but not just yet. We still are not there yet. I'm just going to keep teasing the idea without elaborating on it so you can go, dude, what is this guy smoking? Oh my God. In Skyrim, you may disagree, but there was basically no point where it ever felt that challenging. As the game progresses, you get more powerful, and you eventually get to a point where you're just flattening anything in front of you. From a role-playing perspective, this makes perfect sense. This is a major spoiler. I'm about to tell you about Skyrim, so cover your ears. I'm going to whisper so you don't hear. Okay. So in Skyrim, you actually play as the Dragonborn. I know, right? Nobody knows that, but it's true. You're Dragonborn. So from a role-playing perspective, you're like the most powerful person on the face of the Nern. You're like a demigod. And it makes sense that you would be able to just foos the living shit out of people and watch their forsworn bodies ragdoll down a cliffside. But that's not who you are in Oblivion. In Oblivion, you're basically nobody. You wake up in a jail cell. You find out that the Emperor has been dreaming about your powerful orcish body, and he love bombs you with this dank necklace, which is like really a red flag at this early point in your relationship together. And then you go on and become the hero of Kvatch against all odds. And you keep closing Oblivion gates. You gather like an army from all over Cyrodiil to battle back against Mehrunes Dagon, the Daedric Prince of Destruction. And the main quest is, in every way, like this epic, incredible quest line. But the most heroic thing you do throughout Oblivion is basically survive. And I think that's like true. It's heroic to survive, I think, if you're a warrior facing against hordes. And so thus far throughout my playthrough, I felt overmatched pretty much the whole time. And I think I should feel that way. There is no reason why I, a regular hero fresh out of the sewer, should be able to confidently cut down a ton of enemies at once. And so I make the comparison to Dark Souls because at every turn, there's danger. No battles feel certain, which is, okay, not true. I mean, I'm not struggling against like a wolf or a mud crab. But sometimes there's bandits or like skeletons or necromancers, or sometimes I'm outnumbered, and it's challenging. It's difficult. I'm like really using my brain and trying to think like, how am I going to approach this? Every fight has this intentionality. And so I say that this seemingly simple combat experience is actually good, because I'm paying very close attention to the dance, between me and the enemies. I've been using a claymore, which gives me a reach advantage. I'm consistently strafing to try and keep a distance between me and my opponent, trying to be just far enough away so they can't reach me, and just close enough so I can reach them. What I found out is, on the one hand, I didn't realize that because of my build and the way the difficulty multiplier works, I might want to start standing still and blocking more often so I can recover more fatigue faster. Because, when you're at 0 fatigue, which I often am because I power attack and jump around a lot, you're doing half damage. And so anyways, I'm strafing, I'm keeping distance between me and my opponent, I'm timing my blocks. And when you time your block, well, you don't have to time the block, but when you block your enemy and they can easily flank you, and they do because they move quickly, and it's kind of high octane, even though it looks like everyone's a sponge. But when you block somebody correctly, they recoil, and that gives you an opening to strike. However, if they're super powerful, they can break your block and stagger you. And this can easily shift the advantage by knocking people off balance. And, they, like, there's this spinning power attack you can do that disarms your opponent. And that's cool when you're like, wow, I'm so leveled up with my blade ability that I'm able to disarm people. But your opponents are able to do that as well. I've been disarmed mid-fight, and it was like, oh, shit, they've got the same perks I do because I'm no better than they are. And so, you know, combat has felt very lively and I think well designed, personally speaking. I think it's good design and it's simple design, but it's good. When I'm outnumbered, I get knocked on my ass. Like, it's not, there's no, in Skyrim, you know, I run in and I kill 100 Stormcloaks and I'm like, man, I haven't broken a sweat. In this game, when I've got 3 Argonian prisoners coming at me, I'm freaking out. I'm like, I'm scared. And so that brings me to my retort to a common complaint about this game, which is that it's hard to get through the game as a pure warrior or a pure thief without any magic. And I'm going to address this opinion in a way that I can only describe as slightly disrespectful. Here goes. So you're telling me, if you hold this opinion, that it is your opinion that you, a regular person fresh out of the sewer, should be able to go toe-to-toe with Mehrunes Dagon and the Daedric hordes pouring out of Oblivion, single-handedly, in regular gear, with regular weapons and regular armor, in your steel battlesuit, with your steel longsword and steel shield. You think you ought to be able to cut down Dremora lords with their burning swords and their team of scamps and spiders and fire-blasting buddies. You think you should be able to level up comfortably and take on this, like, undead army with no problem as a pure warrior? Or do you think that it makes more sense for you to have to find ways to become more powerful? My point is, in the lore and in the game, there's this guy, Mannimarco, the King of Worms. Mannimarco is one of the most powerful necromancers ever. He ascended to kind of like godhood, but he was just a talented mage. He had to find ways to become more powerful. He wound up sending associates into the realm of Molag Bal to bring back black soul gems so he could start trapping more souls and amass power and make this undead army. You, the hero of Kvatch, are sort of like Mannimarco. You need to pull out all the stops to make it through this quest line. And the danger and the threat of that danger should be pushing you to figure out ways to become more powerful, such as by trapping souls, enchanting your weapons, using magic. You are not going to win this battle without some magic on your side. It's ridiculous to think that you should be. You know, powerful magical weapons and armor, powerful spells, powerful potions to enhance your abilities. The idea that you should be able to just bash in the brains of everyone who comes before you because you have a big hammer and you're a big guy is ridiculous. You're not that guy. You're the hero of Kvatch. You've got to figure out what Daedra to go make a pact with, use their artifacts, figure out, like, how am I going to summon a goblin army, you know, start a goblin war into Oblivion. Anyway, so I think the combat makes sense. I think it's balanced. I think it makes sense that as I level up, I'm going to struggle against people, and that I'm going to need to have an enchanted sword to get through that because I'm, you know, anyway. So I recently had a quest given to me by Meridia. She wanted me to take out a group of necromancers who were hiding in the back of a cave, trying to raise an army of the undead.
By the detritus of the profane I am brought forth, and by your offering you have made the profane your interest mortal. The undead are foul, unnatural things. Some of my rivals take pleasure in these abominations. Not Meridia. I wish these creatures destroyed. Hidden behind a door, deep in Howling Cave, are necromancers. They rob graves for the materials to raise their undead armies. Find these necromancers. Destroy them and their abominations. Do this, and earn the gratitude of Meridia.
So I went to the cave, and it was exactly as she'd described, and I waltzed up in there completely outnumbered, and I got a swift kick in the ass. And I went back in there, and I was like, well, what if I try Berserk? What if I focus on the necromancers? And, because I know I'm doing shock damage, and I know shock damage does some amount of damage to your magicka, etc. But every time, I was completely outnumbered, and I got dismissed, to put it simply. And that's honestly how the fight ought to go. No matter how powerful you are, if you get into a situation where you're outnumbered like 10 or 20 to 1, such as this situation, you're probably not going to win that fight. I don't care if you're Khabib Nurmagomedov or John Bones Jones or whatever fighter IRL you think is the greatest fighter alive, the baddest dude on earth. If there are 10 people coming at them, they're probably going to get swarmed. Someone's going to grab a leg. Somebody's going to twist your ankle. They're going to knock you off balance, whatever else have you. And that's exactly how it feels to take on a bunch of people when you're outnumbered in Oblivion. That's, I think, how it ought to feel. It feels real. Like, I wound up cheesing this section, and I don't feel bad about it. I was like, how am I going to problem solve this? I'm going to cheese it. And I would kind of duck in and lure some people out, kill one or two, heal. Like, I think it took like 10 minutes to get through and actually take out all these necromancers. And it was like a long problem solving. My heart rate went up like it was a Dark Souls or like an Elden Ring boss fight. I did the 3 Argonian prisoners, 3 to 1. 2 of them were unarmed, but I still had a difficult time fighting them because any fight that's 3 versus 1 ought to feel difficult. So when I compare the game to the Souls genre, that's ultimately what I'm talking about. When you're outnumbered, you feel it, because as you get hit, you get knocked off balance. And as that happens, things snowball to the point where you're effectively dogpiled. Even in a 1v1 to the death, you can't just sleepwalk your way through the fight most of the time. There are definitely occasions where I have, but what I'm coming to appreciate thus far about Oblivion is that it's always a challenge. No fight feels certain, and it's forcing me to be creative. I'm running around using the terrain to my advantage, trying to have the high ground like I'm with Anakin. I'm using my surroundings to catch my breath, to block their spells, like putting a pillar between me and a bad guy. I have to keep aware of my surroundings because I don't want to wind up in a situation where I'm cornered by multiple enemies. Oblivion always feels dangerous, always. And that's what I appreciate about it thus far. And that's my opinion right now. I think I'm level like 15 or 16. We'll see how it starts to feel as I get to higher levels. I've just upgraded my mysticism to like 25 so I can start soul trapping, start enchanting stuff. I'm thinking I'm going to want to, because I am kind of a pure warrior and I have low intelligence because I'm an orc. I'm thinking that I'll probably like potentially want to get like a fortify blade armor set going to boost my damage. And be casting like fortify fatigue spells and maybe that'll carry me through the mid game. I don't know. I'm probably going to talk about the level scaling later on, once I've played through everything and have like more of an overview perspective on this game. But so far, the combat feels really good. Level scaling wise, I don't know, maybe it doesn't make sense for an invisible mountain lion to do more damage per bite than an enchanted sword does per slash. I don't know why an orc twice the size of a invisible mountain lion and the orc in heavy armor. Like, I don't feel like I should have been eviscerated here. But then again, lions are terrifying. And I think if there's anything that they need to revise in the remake of Oblivion, in terms of combat, it's probably going to be the level scaling, being more constant throughout the world. I think Dark Soul or Elden Ring has kind of proven, well, Souls, they've kind of proven that. I think a better way to do level scaling is like, hey, Caelid's right here. Don't go to Caelid yet. You're not strong enough. And if you decide you want to waltz up into Caelid, you're going to get a swift kick in the butt. And then you're going to say, hey, I'm going to go somewhere else. So I think having like perpetually scaled enemies and certain things where it's like, hey, yeah, you're not that guy. You can't do this right now would be the way to do level scaling. Like, hey, you know, these guys over here, they're always this powerful. These guys over there, they're always this powerful. Umbra is always going to be godlike because Umbra is going to be millennia, etc. You know, I think ultimately, to sum it up, there's a lot to like about Oblivion's simple combat the way it is, where even now, almost 20 years later, I find myself appreciating it. There's a real flow to it. It's difficult. You have to be creative. And I think all of those things make this style of combat, simple as it is, a real winner. And, you know, it sounds like it will be in some ways different in the remake, but I'm hoping they don't change too much because ultimately I think this system is not broken. Thanks for watching. This has been Groby. See you next time. Or whatever. I don't know.